Hi there, Brendan.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Um, Greetings. I'm just pinning, pinning this.
Pin away.
Pin away. Greetings. Good morning. Where are you?
Los Angeles. You?
We could have met in person.
We still have time.
Where are you? What part of
Silver
town?
Lake.
Oh my God, so am I. What street are you on?
Lakeview.
We are a few blocks. You could probably shout out the window and say hi to me.
Do you live there?
I am here for a couple days. I used to live here, and I'm sort of become a perpetual traveler. Um, but um, but yeah, how was that thunderstorm last night, huh?
Yeah, last night and this morning. Yeah, I got up
Yeah,
early to do. I had a little class to do this morning, and it was thundering the whole way through.
it's nice. A class meaning you were teaching something online or
No, I went to a wrestling martial arts beatdown
uh,
class at 7 a.m. this morning, and it was fun because it had a soundtrack this morning.
yeah, yeah, that followed by the car alarms
That
always.
also, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
there's much needed rain here in California, so it's a
yeah,
welcome thunderstorm.
yeah, exactly. Um, well, thank you so much for joining me on hotsticks.fm, otherwise known as airdrummer.com. We have two
Awesome.
websites. One's video, one's audio. Um, you are a master of many genres as a drummer. I see you've actually even got the drums behind you. For the audio version, people will not be able to see that, but are those real drums or is that a green screen?
Yeah, I'm at a studio. This is my avatar. No, this is a drum set that I used yesterday on a recording for a friend of mine. So that's a
Want to plug your friend?
mostly, well, this is just a assortment of different things here. I mean, if you look around the room, there's drums everywhere, but this one happens to be my 60s Ludwig kit with the snare drum is an odd one. It's actually called a Sherwood, Sherwood, I think. Um, and I bought it at Pro Drum in LA just because it looked old and cool, and it was very affordable because what's a Sherwood? And then I looked it up on the internet. Apparently, it was like an offshoot of Ludwig for a year or two. It's the same thing. So it's like a
Uh-huh.
40s Ludwig snare with
Wow.
a different badge on it, and it sounds incredible.
Does it have
And
like a jazzy feel in some way?
it can.
I
Uh,
mean, the snare that existed before rock music, which is kind of
yeah,
cool.
there are certain drums, like maybe in the 90s, I used to take every drum I would audition to buy, and I would just take it and start whacking rim shots on it and say, sounds good, take it home. Whack, 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 whack. Sounds pretty good because that's how I played in the 90s, basically. And now there's certain drums that sound really good when you just do the tip in the center of the snare drum, no rim shot thing. And there's other
Uh-huh.
drums that sound really good when you nail them like a aluminum baseball bat on a pipe, you know.
Right.
So you have sometimes. So sometimes I look at drums and I'm like, I don't think that's the bashing rim shotty drum. That's more of the thuddy in the center kind of drum. And so you have your pile of snare drums that's more for that style, and the pile of snare drums that's more for whacking two and four with a rim shot, and you kind
Right.
of
Okay.
separate them.
How many snare drums do you have in your place?
I've lost count. It varies from I don't know, 30 to 50, I guess.
Wow.
It
That's
depends on how much money I need, or I sell a bunch and then I buy a few again, and
this is
it
and
fluctuates.
as an air drummer, I can play all of your snare drums in my mind,
Yeah,
and it's very cheap.
it's very efficient also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I you're with DW for hardware or
I've been with DW Drums since 2000 or 2001. I can't remember exactly when I signed with
okay.
them, but yeah, I've been with them for over 20 years, drums and hardware, and
Nice.
LP percussion, Sabian cymbals since the late 90s, Remo, Vic Firth. I've been with the same companies for, yeah, 20 years or longer.
John Lombardi is such a wonderful guy over at DW, and Do you do
He
stuff at
is.
the well?
Yeah, I do. I'm
Yeah.
only like slightly over an hour drive away from their factory, so I'll get the random email or phone call like, "Hey, what are you doing on Friday morning? You want to come up and do something with us?" And I'm a big fan of drum education in general, just all forms of drum education. So anytime anyone has any type of idea that involves getting drums out to the masses, I'm down. So, and I think
So
Don is really good with that stuff.
he's great with it. I mean, he was ahead of the curve, and these days, obviously, there's so many Instagram drummers and people who are kind of getting their chops, but never playing with other people because they've become really proficient again, playing with their phone,
Hmm.
uh, playing along with the music. And I was talking with him about the difference between the kind of education people get from watching some Instagram drummer versus an actual, pro drummer who plays with other people and kind of can talk to them in a more measured way. I mean, what do you think you provide when you go up to a drum channel as a teacher online that someone isn't going to get from an Instagram drummer with 1 million followers who.
Well, if I'm if I have no prompts and they say just teach something, then I'll usually teach either whatever I'm working on, or what I find works for me, or what helps me play the drums better. I'm always looking for cheat codes to get better at the drums, like discarding exercises that have no meaning to me and finding exercises that actually make me better at what I do. So if I find one, I'm like, oh, this is great. I wish I knew this 20 years ago. I'm going to share this exercise.
Mhm.
And so that's usually what I teach if someone asks me, just, show us something. However, what I found, what also works well is people just wanting me to tell stories about
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
What it was like going from my teens to my 20s, or what it was like moving from here to here, or working with this person, working with that
Yeah.
person. So I find that
DMX.
when it comes to teaching, part of it is me like consciously passing on drum exercises or advice, and part of it is just me sharing stories.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I having you on Hot Six. I'm of course, well, not of course, but I love hearing stories, and I got my own special questions based on your incredible roster of people you played with, like playing with someone like DMX and playing with Miley Cyrus. Like those are pretty, like a pretty different energy that you're going to have to bring on stage. Can you talk a little about working with DMX? I love DMX and
Oh yeah, that was a random thing. I was living in Miami, and I did a lot of studio sessions when I was there, just all sorts of things. And one day, a guitarist friend of mine said, "Hey, I gave your number to the DMX crew. They're looking at putting some live drums on their next album." I'm like, "Wow, that's awesome. I love this last record, so cool." And then, sure enough, I got a call from his manager saying, "What are you doing? Can you come by whatever? I think it was Criteria Studios." And so I showed up with a drum set, and there was just an engineer there, and they said he'll be here with his crew any moment now. And that any moment now was probably 6 or 8 hours later. So
wow.
to kill that time, we just recorded drums. We just set up the drums. I said, "Well, do you have the first song he wants to start with?" Like, "I do." So he played me the song, and I just played through it several times, and we just just the engineer and I just fooled around. And then finally he came in, uh, you know, shook hands, "Nice to meet you," listened to it once, and then went into the vocal booth and tracked vocals on top of it, tracked a double track of vocals, did a hype track on top of that, said, "I love it, we're done." He wasn't even there for me recording it, and he had no notes for me or anything. Just walked in, said,
Wow.
"Love it, I'm going to rap on top of this now."
Right.
So, and he freestyled a bunch of lyrics, and I was blown away by how good he was and how quick he
Yeah.
was. And that was
Yeah.
it. And then at the end of the night, he's like, "Man, this is a great vibe. You want to go on tour with me?" I'm like, "Sure." But that wound up never happening. But I was totally excited to try that.
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been something else.
Hmm.
Um, so I another one that I have to ask about is Julio Iglesias. Is that senior or junior or both?
That would be
or
senior.
Senior. That's pretty badass. Was that in studio or live or both?
That was live. That's the To All the Girls I've Loved Before. That Julio. So it was that was also in Miami, and his longtime drummer Lee Levin was a friend of mine, and he was leaving, or at least taking a hiatus from the band. So I got called to either fill in, sub, or take over the gig. And my audition was, they sent me a 90-minute cassette tape of a live show and said, learn the first 6 songs and fly out to our next sound check. And so I did that. I flew out to the sound check. I met him. I sat down. I played the first 6 songs of his show with the band. And he said, I love it. You'll play the show tonight. And I said, I looked around. I'm like, well, I only learned the first 6 songs. He's like, well, then you just play the first 6 songs tonight, and then my other drummer will hop back on the stage. And that's how I got the gig.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was great because I might have been, I think, 21 at the time. So
flew down there. You didn't know you had the gig, and you were flying on your own dime.
No, they paid for me to fly in to basically a sound check rehearsal.
Okay, that's gentlemanly.
Yeah, it was an audition, but I wasn't expecting to get the gig that quickly. I thought I was going to fly home and come out 2 weeks later or something.
Yeah, you're not expecting to play that night. So they were basically understudying you and get you on 6 songs, and then you were good to go the next day, essentially.
That night, yeah.
I mean, after those 6 songs, though, because they had you play 6, and then they had the other drum.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
And then I had to quickly run across the street to a mall and get a long sleeve button down shirt and pants, because I probably had a shorts and a tank top at that point.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, shoot, I got to go get ready. So it was fun. It was a great gig while it lasted.
Yeah, like so we talk about drum sound and snare sound and all that. So when you're doing a gig like that, you get whatever the drum tech is set up in front of you, you're going to play that, or do you bring your own heads or cymbals or snare or your foot pedal, or what do you travel with when you're like a journeyman like that?
Yeah, I actually have to say it's different for every situation. For instance, certain gigs, I have my entire setup customized down to, measurements and everything. And that all goes into cases and goes on the road for 8 months or 18 months and travels around the world with me. And my drum tech and I set it up once, mark everything, memory lock everything. And it's that way every night for the rest of the tour.
Right. Okay.
The total opposite is I often fly into shows where they rent a kit from some local backline agency like an SIR or Center Staging or some company like that, and they just get as close as they can to my specs. So I'll email them, can you get me this? Can you get me a DW with a 13 rack, a 22-inch kick, 16 and 18-inch floor toms, a nickel over brass 6x14-inch snare drum, 3 crashes, ride, hi-hat, and they say, well, we'll get as close as we can to that. And then I show up to the venue and I see what they have, and I make it work. If it's a Yamaha drum set with Evan heads and ProMark sticks and zillion cymbals, I'm like, darn it. Well, let's do this anyway. And we make the show happen. And then if there's in between, sometimes if I feel like being specific, I'll fly with my stick bag, my in-ears, maybe my charts, like notes, and a metronome, maybe a pedal, maybe my cymbals, maybe a snare drum. But I have found that traveling with less is easier. So I try to get by using as much rental gear as I can, unless they can fly all of my stuff. Right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm traveling around as a filmmaker. I've now got like this mini kit that I bring with me. 1 camera, 1 lens, 1 gimbal. And, if I can bring it in a carry-on. And I find for me, it's really nice to, of course I have the gear I might want, but I have a gear that I can carry onto a plane, which is a nice feeling of like, you know, capability in the sense that you know that you can do your job anywhere. I mean, I was in Latvia and I got called to film in Ukraine a few weeks ago, and I shot a lot in Ukraine and have friends there and have a lot of emotional connection there. And so having the opportunity to like fly off somewhere, like it was a, you know, it was sort of like your Iglesias thing. It was the actor Liev Schreiber was going in and needed someone to drive around with him. And it was like, okay, when are you planning on doing that? And we're like, tonight. So, you know, there I went. And
I suppose that your little travel kit is something that you maybe couldn't have had 25 years ago either. Maybe you would have either a gigantic thing with a VHS tape in it, or even like some kind of reel-to-reel thing. And like now you can have a portable little technological.
No, it's amazing. I have 3 microphones, a camera, a lens, a gimbal, and it's like, you know, this big. And I've shot a lot on it. I went down to Brazil and shot there recently for this show I'm putting together, and yeah, having that portability. I made a movie about air drummers where the idea is that you will always have whatever the heartbeat is, whatever the thing is that you want to create in the world has to be in you, and you can't rely on the gear, whatever it is, you know. So I try to live my life as well as my character in the movie does, you know, in the sense of like finding that capability within yourself, and being ready at all times. And obviously technology has made that easier recently with, you know, film stuff, but not so much with drums. You need your drums. I think someone is asking about, someone's saying you sounded great with Stu Brooks and Perry F, which I assume is Perry Farrell. You want to talk about that?
Perry's the best. I started working with him, I think in 2018. He released a solo record, and I got called to join what would be his solo project called Kind Heaven. And Stu Brooks now plays in that band. It was Chris Chaney prior to that. He's the bassist for Jane's Addiction. So, and now Stu's doing it. He's great. And it's a fun LA all-star cast, killer musicians. And Perry's just wonderful. I grew up listening to Jane's Addiction and Porno for Pyro, so it was kind of a little odd to work with him in the beginning because I had seen him live so many times. But he's great. He's just so nice. He loves music. He's super positive. He's a joy to work with. We did a European tour. We were going to do a South American tour right as the pandemic hit, so that was a bummer. But I do have a gig with him next week. So we have rehearsals this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again.
Okay, well, you can tell him I saw him with Jane's Addiction at the Stone on Broadway in San Francisco, and I think there were maybe 17 people there.
What year was that?
That would have been like late 80s somewhere, like 88, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That was when they were still playing for 17 people. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a inspiring album, and the show was a bit of a mess, I'll say. And it was a charming mess, but I was like, wow, they didn't get enough sleep would be a way of putting it. But
yeah. So I have a gig next week with so Perry's going to do a show here in LA where half the night is going to be his solo band and half the night is going to be Porno for Pyros with Stephen Perkins. So it'll be he's so nice. So it'll be fun to share the stage with him.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on the show. I've been I don't know if I've ever met him. I feel like I met him possibly at an Ozomatli show. But you played with Ozomatli too, right?
I did. Ozomatli's another crazy good band. When I first moved to LA, their drummer at the time was Mario Caliri, who was the drummer for the Wallflowers and a bunch of other acts. And he asked me to sub for them. And it was, to this day, one of the hardest gigs I ever had to sub. Like, learning that material was super challenging because it was so varied. There were so many stops and hits and unison sections, and they do everything different every night. It's all on cue. So watch the bassist for this, watch the saxophone player for this. So I I almost had a breakdown learning that set. But
How much time did
when
you have to prep?
man, I think I practiced for 2 weeks straight, like every day for 2 weeks, trying to get that show together. And then I flew out to their first show, no rehearsal, just sound check. Got there, we ran maybe 6 songs at sound check and said, all right, cross your fingers, let's see how this goes. And we went and did a festival tour and all over. Like we started in California, and then we went to Australia, Tasmania, New Zealand, and it was a blast. It was so fun. I'm still friends with those guys. They're so talented.
Yeah. Can you talk about your biggest choke on stage? Because I'm sure there's people out there who, you know, think about prepping for 2 weeks to play with Ozo Motley, or prepping for whatever it was, 2 hours to play with Julio Iglesias. You must have had some things go sideways on stage. Can you share something that where you were really embarrassed, and, you know, just to make the students feel better, you know?
Oh no, I mean, let me say, like Murphy's Law style, like if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. There's you have to expect things to go wrong. It's not like you wish them, but you have to practice, and in your mind while you're practicing, you have to say, what if the singer doesn't come in here? What if my hi-hat falls apart here? What if I can't hear the click track anymore? What if the computer crashes? What if my bass drum head breaks? You know, you have to have all of these scenarios in your mind while you're playing, so it doesn't shock you when it actually does happen. So I think that's one of the things I have now, is so much experience where when I go to play a show, I have the show down in a perfect scenario. But then you also have to start thinking, what if it's not a perfect scenario? Can I still get through the show? It might not be A+, but can I get through the show even if something goes wrong? Because it will go wrong. So, I mean, there are tons of times where, so a lot of acts I play with now have tracks, some kind of computers running with click tracks. So that's a whole mess where it's going to crash at some point. Sometimes it's going to skip.
You wear like an in-ears, and then also ones on top as a backup if something were to fall out of your ear. Because if you're working with all that click and you got stuff falls out, you got problems, right?
Well, here is what okay, so what I normally do is I have one set of in-ears in my ears, like headphones coming out of my ears, going into a pack. The pack is wired, meaning there's nothing wireless, no signal. It goes straight into the monitor board. I also have a second set of in-ears on stage with me, just next to me, lying on my like little table. And I have a second pack on my belt, which is a wireless pack. So in case the first one dies, I just unplug it and plug it into the second one.
Right, okay.
I also develop a communication with anyone who's running the electronics on the side of stage with various cues as to how we're going to start songs, how we're going to stop songs, how if something goes wrong, what are we going to do? If someone gets lost, how are we going to fix that? Who do we follow? So this all has to be talked about in advance. So when it happens for the first time, you're not all on stage looking at each other like, what is going on? You know, you have to say, okay, singer didn't come out in time from their wardrobe change. We're going to shut off the computer. We're going to vamp the intro. And when I look at you, start the first chorus. You know, you have these cues all set up. So it's just, you know, just working through all the possible scenarios is what you have to do. So if you want me to share stories, there's just too many, because there's everything can go wrong as far as the gear can fall apart.
Give me the one where you actually got home and you were like, wow, I really didn't, you know, the one that felt like a nightmare. If there is one, just because, you know, people like to be humanized. I mean, you know, there's that saying, you know, you don't know who you are until you're face down in the arena, you know, and your face is in the dirt and everyone's seen you down there. And then how do you stand up again? That's what I'd love to hear. You've got it.
Man, no, I feel like there's
stuff like if you want to, you know.
I feel like there's dozens and dozens of moments like that where I just like have to say, well, that was one show. Got to move on. You got to move on. You know, just keep on. You don't point fingers. You don't freak out. You just move on. And I think a lot of it has to do with electronics and monitoring. Right. So I think I was doing a show once where I was subbing for a drummer, a friend of mine. So it's not my show. It's not my rig. It's not my drum set. It's not anything. I just learn the music. I sit down. I start playing this show, live audience, and second song, my ears stop working. I don't know why they stopped working. I start looking around. I'm like, did anyone else lose the click and the tracks and everything? And everyone else just keeps playing. So I'm like, no, it must be me. So I start looking around like, I can't play anymore because I can't hear the music. So I just kind of slowly drop out, and everyone looks at me. I'm like, I don't have headphones anymore. And I would normally have backup packs. I would normally be able to see the monitor engineer. I would normally be able to see the guy running the tracks. I would normally have a talkback mic next to me so I can communicate to everyone, but it's not my show. So I'm just going by what they had. So I had to sit there until they fixed it. I had to sit there was probably 30 seconds, but felt like an hour. While they sorted out the problem, which is why I'm pretty adamant about having a system in place for things to go wrong.
So when you say you dropped out, so the bassist kept going, was there a percussionist? Was there any percussion or backing tracks? Or was
I think
it
there were just loops and things.
Okay,
yeah.
So there wasn't a total dropout of rhythm section.
I don't think so. I don't remember.
But
I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's, I guess, just things always go wrong. And the thing is, you have to be good enough where the audience isn't going to notice. You know, the band might notice, the band might freak out and say, oh my God, what happened? But make sure that it's not evident to the spectators, you know, make sure they have a good time still.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen my movie Adventures of Power yet, but his stool collapses at the end of the movie, and he keeps air drumming. So the show must go on. This is actually for the video version of this is the German. I pulled this off my shelves because I've been away for so long. Came back to my house, and I remembered I have a German language version of a DVD, which says "Luftgitarre war gestern," which means air guitar was yesterday. Air drummer movie.
Well, that's a motto to live by.
A motto to live by, yeah. Who else would I love to ask about? I mean, Shakira. How did you end up working with Shakira?
That happened through, again, a Miami thing where I was, let's see, Gloria Estefan had a recording studio there that was pretty prominent at the time. I don't think it's around anymore. So I used to work there from time to time, and Shakira came through Miami to record one of her records, and the producer and the engineer called me up and asked me to come by and throw what they called some rock drums on one of the songs. So I came by and I did that, and
when someone like that asks for rock drums, what does that mean? Like,
I think it means that at the time, so this was 1998, so at the time I think it meant that she's a pop artist, but she wants it to sound a little more more rocking, so kind of stuff, as opposed to, you know, programming dance beats and stuff like that. So I think that's what that means normally is well, the demos probably all have electronics on them, but they think it would be nice to add acoustic drums to it to give it a little more beef. So I think that's what it meant in the 90s. Was there was so much there was so much loops and
like John Bonham or Steve Gadd.
Well, it could be,
It could be.
Yeah, it could be depending on the song. But I think a lot of people, when they're making their music, they start with electronic demos, and then they say, this is pretty good. I like the way it sounds as is. Or they say, let's replace these chintzy little electronic parts like fake violins or fake bass or fake drums with real musicians, and they slowly replace the parts with session musicians. So that's pretty standard now, actually, is people create demos first, and then they decide what parts they can keep and what parts need to be replaced.
Right, okay.
So that was that, and then I wound up playing on, I guess, maybe 6 songs in the span of 2 weeks there, and then from that point on, I started playing live shows with her and her band, and I've been doing it ever since then.
Wow. So when you came down to Florida, were you expecting at that point? How old were you when you moved down to Florida?
I moved down to Florida from New Jersey when I was 18 years old.
And were you expecting, like, why growing up playing drums in Jersey, what was your style? Who were your influences at that point?
I liked a lot of heavy metal and punk rock music.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked everything from Slayer and Metallica to Rush and Fugazi and Bad Brains and Minor Threat.
Neil Peart is the inaugural episode of Hot Sticks. So you're in his company on this show.
Wow, that's great.
And we had Dave Lombardo on as well.
Yeah, I listened to that episode. Yeah.
Yeah. So you weren't necessarily at that point, as a punk and metal drummer from Jersey, expecting to go into kind of Latin and pop and Gloria Estefan and that whole world, or did you kind of suspect that would happen when you went to Miami?
No, I had no expectations. While being a lover of punk rock music, I also took drum lessons from Tommy Igoe when I was in high school. He was my drum teacher. So he taught me jazz. He taught me classical percussion, classical snare drums. He taught me marching, rudimental drumming. So I got a wide range of drum appreciation from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to music school, I just wanted to get better. I didn't think about what I wanted to do with it. I just wanted to get better because I felt so insufficient at the drums.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied to a bunch of different music schools and I wound up choosing Miami. I went down there and I just fell in love with the music school and I fell in love with the city itself. I made a lot of friends. I played a lot of gigs and I just tried to repair or fix all my deficiencies as quickly as I could. And that meant getting better at jazz, getting better at Latin, getting better at funk, getting better at pop, getting better at session music, getting better at fusion music. So I just practiced a lot and tried to suck a little bit less every day.
Uh-huh. And now you're helping people suck less. You're teaching also sometimes at Musicians Institute, is that right? Or
I do teach there from time to time. Yeah, my friends are the faculty members there. So I'll teach there from time to time or privately, either here at my studio or either, on Skype or Zoom, or sometimes even when I'm traveling, I'll pick an off day and I'll reach out to some people and say, I have a day off in New York City. Does anyone want to do lessons? And I'll just get a rehearsal room somewhere and teach a bunch of local students there. And anything I can do to help people deal with the problems with this inherent problems with this instrument that they're running into, because as we learn the instrument, we run into coordination problems or musical problems or all sorts of things. So I think, anything that I've gone through that I can pass along that'll help them get past a hurdle or a speed bump, I'd love to pass it along so they don't have to suffer.
Yeah, it does seem like these days drums, have become such a technical instrument on the tech side, actually, because you're talking about sync, you're talking about working with backing tracks, and you think about like the old days of drums. I would imagine that there's a 50% of your brain power now is dealing with a level of tech that someone playing in 1972 for a rock band or whatever wouldn't have had to even think about. Like, they got a monitor and they're playing as loud as they can so they can hear, and that's it. How do you think that has affected the kind of people who end up prospering as drummers and your own process, where, like, obviously playing punk and metal as a 15-year-old, you weren't dealing with any of that tech, I would imagine. You're probably just in a room somewhere hoping to hear the bass player if you're lucky. But now you got all this other stuff going on. How does that affect your playing? How does it affect your sense of freedom?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that you have to approach every era as a different set of problems and goals and accomplishments. If you look at a drummer from the 1930s or 40s, they were playing a different style of drumming, different style of music, maybe they read a lot better. Maybe they sight read better. Maybe they played at different volumes. Maybe they could simmer at a burning fast tempo, but quiet. And so you would learn different skill sets. And in the 70s, that was kind of where studio drumming got really specific, but there still wasn't computers. So guys had to get really good at going for takes to 2-inch tape, you know, maybe without a click track. So there was no editing in Pro Tools back then. So you had to be up, and like, that's why those drummers excel. The guys who can play super steady with great tone and get, you know, 3 amazing takes in 1 hour, and boom, they're done. And those, whether it's Jim Keltner, Hal Blaine, Jeff Porcaro, whoever it is, those guys excelled for a different skill set. And now we have a skill set where you don't actually in the studio have to play for more than 8 bars if you don't want to, because they'll just cut and paste you anyway. But there's different things to achieve. Can you get current drum sounds? Can you record yourself? Can you play to a click track really well? Live, are you familiar with triggering? Are you familiar with Ableton? Are you familiar with all the things involved with, you know, the blend of acoustic and electronic drumming? So yeah, you just have to prepare yourself for what are the demands of this current era of drumming. You can honor things like you say, I love Buddy Rich, or I love Art Blakey, or I love, that's cool. I love Ringo Starr. That's great. But that's the history of drumming, and that's important to study. But there's also, what are the guys right now who are excelling? What are they doing that's allowing them to excel? And that's a different thing to work on, you know? Yeah.
I mean, I had confessed that I play drums a little bit. You know, I can say I confess because as you know, an air drummer, I'm not supposed to play real drums, but I've never had, you know, I always played in bands where it was just plug in and play somewhere. So I never had to deal with any of that level of tech. And it does sound to me like, you know, it's a strange experience to imagine having to have my mind, you know, not just the 4 limbs playing different things, but also the mind on the click. And, you know, maybe you're playing with you know, you're playing with a pre-record at the same time of other drums, and wow, it sounds really hard. It sounds challenging.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're a drummer who only plays in one band, then you master those challenges. But if you're a freelance drummer and you're expected to play with a different artist or artists every week, you have to constantly adjust to a new situation. So you develop your skill sets to be able to accomplish your job, and by plopping yourself in a new room every week. And that's where you really see what is necessary, you know, what things are necessary. You know, how do you communicate with the rest of the people in the room? How do you accomplish whatever the job is, if it's recording or performing a show or rehearsing? And yeah, it's fun. I have a close-knit group of guys here in LA that all do what I do, and they do it really well. So we share stories and say, like, have you ever had this happen, or how would you approach that? And it's really good that it's not just me, like, just like trying to fight my way out of a paper bag, but I feel like there's a bunch of guys who all do this job. So you can ask them, have you ever had a situation where this happened, and how did you approach that? And we all give each other advice and encouragement.
Yeah. It sounds like the community of drummers. So there's some kids playing here. Is that super loud on the mic, or is it okay? My next door neighbor.
No. Are they random kids, or do they belong to you, or?
No, they're my next door neighbor. I just didn't know how loud my mic is picking it up. So
I don't mind.
Okay. Curious to know if there's any beats that you feel you invented. I mean, talk about like someone like Gad, or, you know, you mentioned Porcaro, who, you know, synthesized a couple other people's shuffles to make his own shuffle. Is there a Buckley beat that you consider a signature, or is that a kind of silly way to think about drum? I mean, you know, as a non-professional drummer, I love when a drummer like comes up with something that I can identify as them. Do you have something like that in your repertoire?
No, that's, I don't think it's silly because, okay, this is something I actually think about a lot because I am a drummer for hire. So I enjoy learning other people's music and playing it perfectly to their liking. But also, I like to inject a little bit of what I consider my identity also. Not so much that I'm disrespecting their music, but enough where I think that why am I here unless I get to be myself a little bit too. So I try to always find where that line is with each person with whom I'm working. Like, do I have to be more true to all their classic recordings, or can I do it just however I feel musically, or some blend of in between? So I do that all the time. And sometimes it's very subtle where you won't really notice. It's not a quote unquote Buckley beat because I'm taking what they do and I massage it in a way where I think it works better to my ears. And then sometimes when I'm in the studio recording a song, sometimes I say, I want to play something that's never been done before. And that's a lofty goal because everything has been done already. But I say, let me just shoot for the stars and maybe I'll land on the moon, you know, so there's times where I say, let me just keep on working on a beat that is unconventional. And you tell me if it's awkward or stupid, I should just go back to boom, psh, boom, psh, or can I fool around a little bit? And it depends on the artist. If they say, no, go, keep on experimenting. Or sometimes they're like, why are we still working on this song? Boom, boom, cha is the beat. And you're like, sorry, I'll go back to the original. But I think about, I used to play in a band called Pedestrian with a friend of mine named Joel Shear. And if you look up an album called Pedestrian Ghostly Life, that was the name of the album I played on. There are a couple beats there that I feel like there's one called Hummingbird on a Wire. And it starts out with a 4-bar drum intro that I think I invented. And it's a really weird drum sound. Like we got a super old Gretsch kit or Slingerland kit, I can't remember. And we mic'd it with only maybe 4 mics, and we ran the mics through a bunch of guitar pedals. And then I just played some beat that sounds a little backwards right before the vocals come in. And when I listen to that, I'm like, cool, that one's kind of different.
Pretty badass, yeah.
That could have been way more down the middle Charlie Watts, but I decided to kind of turn it upside down a little bit.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Myers from Devo, the drummer for Devo. Yeah. But I love his drum parts. And if you listen to their cover of I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
That's one of the most amazing drum parts ever. It's
best drum beat ever, I think. Best drum beat ever.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing where I'm talking about, like, if
it shouldn't work. It's a groove that shouldn't work, but it works so well. And I guess it pissed off a lot of Rolling Stones fans when they did it. So that's even more amazing, is that they like had this groovy, bizarre beat that made the older people up angry.
Yeah, snare drum on beat 1. It's so bizarre. I actually, when I first moved to LA, I just coincidentally befriended Alan Myers. He's passed away now, but we were friends, and I reserved my fandom for a while and just was nice to him. And at a certain point, I said, I'm sorry to do this, but can I ask you, how did you come up with the beat for I Can't Get No Satisfaction? He said they were rehearsing it in the studio, and he was listening to a lot of classical percussion music like Bartok and things like that at the time. He said he couldn't find a beat that worked for the song. He went for a walk around the block. He came back in the studio and sat down and played that, and that was the beat they kept. And I'm like, I love that story.
Yeah. I mean, that's the muse. You have to get the body away from the idea for a second. I find that, whether when I'm writing something or working on a film thing, you put the work in and you grind on it. And that part is important because it gets the mind working. And then you got to get your mind off of it. And then when your mind is off of it, that's usually when the answer comes.
I've got another story for you. I have a friend of mine named Michael Miller. He's a songwriter. And I was recording drums for one of his albums called I Made You Up. It's called I Made You Up, Michael Miller. And we were in the studio with a live band cutting a bunch of the songs. And, acoustic guitar, vocals, guy playing organ, bass, drums, guitar. Things are going really well. I'm playing brushes on a song. And the guy playing keyboards his name is Rami Jaffe, who's the keyboardist for Foo Fighters. And at some point we're recording a take, and I just hear him go, boring. And I'm like, what? Right in the middle of the song. And he's like, am I right? This is so boring, right? Why don't we do something different? And I'm like, dude, you just ruined a good take. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, man, he's kind of right. We're playing really simple, predictable singer-songwriter music.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone like got into their bag of tricks and got some funky pedals out, and I threw a bunch of stuff on top of my drums and played with some weird broken sticks or something. And then we tried the same song kind of in a weird herky-jerky way, and it was so much hipper.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the singer like, is this cool with you? And he's like, I love it. And then we did the rest of the album like that. Like, don't do the most obvious choice. The most obvious choice might work and might be great, but try something different first. And if it doesn't work, then you can always fall back on the obvious choice.
Yeah. My brother is a singer-songwriter, Ethan Gold, and he did all the music for my films, but also we were talking yesterday because he's been in the studio, and he was saying that, a lot of times he'll be with musicians and they do something that like the groove is perfect. It's totally, exactly this thing. Like it's, but they're playing what you should play. And if you're playing what you should play, it's fine, but you're not going to discover something amazing. And so he's always trying to push, when he's not playing the parts himself, pushing the people to be like, can we turn this upside down? Can we
sometimes you need a, go ahead.
Oh, it's just, I was talking about bass with my brother yesterday, but, Talking Heads bass is so amazing all the time. And, one of the main reasons Talking Heads, in my opinion, were so good is because of Tina Weymouth's bass playing. And she came out of tuba, when she wanted, she sort of, I guess she started learning bass, and they were like, we got to figure out how to, she was like, I got to figure out how to get good. She studied with a tuba player. And so that she didn't play like rock bass. She played these melodies like a tuba player. And that's one of the reasons why those songs, you take away the band and it's David Byrne. It's not, it's cool, but like that band, because of her, always doing unexpected parts.
Yeah.
Makes it
just,
so
super
much
funky somehow. Those Talking Heads records are just unassumingly funky. I'm so impressive.
Listen to what she's doing, and realize like how much of Talking Heads is Tina Weymouth, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So good. But we're I usually try to keep it to about 45 minutes. I had some go way over, but I don't know if there's like a podcast sweet spot, but maybe we'll move towards signing off, and I'd love to just get from you if there's something you want to say to the people who, it looks like you have a lot of fans here who are inspired by you. Like, what little piece of wisdom can you drop for everybody before we wave at each other?
Oh, it's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure. I have to be wise now.
Well, you don't have to be wise. Actually, I'll say one thing. The song that I'm going to listen to after we hang up is Pedestrian Ghostly. It's Pedestrian. It's from the album Ghostly Life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's Hummingbird on a Wire. I have hummingbirds right outside the window here, and I have the Henry Miller book, Stand Still Like a Hummingbird, which is a beautiful phrase. And I think that's a perfect phrase for a drummer. It's like you've got all this like energy and intensity, but at the same time you've got to be right in the pocket the whole time. So how do you stand still like a hummingbird? What's your warm-up? Here, that's a question. That's a less open-ended question. What's your warm-up before you go on? How do you get in the right zone?
My warm-up basically consists of just a full day of just doing everything I can to play great that evening. So I try to get enough sleep the night before. That usually doesn't happen, but I try to eat a healthy breakfast. Mm-hmm. I try to exercise that day. Even
though exercising that night?
Oh yeah. No, I always think that you can't go on stage cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't go on stage like you just got out of bed and you're like, "Ugh." No, I
Yeah.
feel like you have to be loose and be awake, like prior to hitting the first note of the show, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like feeling as though I'm warming up while the show is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'll be ready by song 5. I don't think it's
Yeah.
you're doing any service to the show if that's the way you're playing. So I
Yeah.
always go to the hotel gym and I jog or I stretch or I, you know, so that's all those things are important. I might warm up on a drum pad at some point. I might jump rope at some point. I like to go for a walk around the city of wherever I'm playing so that I feel as though I'm not just going from basketball arena to basketball arena or something.
Yeah.
It's like I want it to feel like I'm doing something different every night for a different audience. So I
Yeah,
try to
that's a big one for touring drummers because or any touring musicians. I talk to musicians who are like, yeah, I didn't even know I was in that town, and I think that's where like depression and drugs and all that stuff can be tempting for people because they're not connected at all. And if you're taking the time to take a walk, even if it's like you pull in somewhere and you only got 20 minutes to do it, and if you're doing that, that's a really great tip.
Yeah, if you go from the bus to your dressing room to the stage, to your dressing room to the bus, to another dressing room, to a different stage, to a dressing room, to a bus, for 45 days straight, you start to go cuckoo, So I mean, Uber and Lyft are a wonderful thing. For $8, you can go to the center of town, walk around, get an amazing cappuccino and some kind of, veggie wrap or something, and come back and you feel like $1 million all of a sudden. And you're like, I'm ready to play wherever, St. Louis now, let's do this.
Yeah.
That's important. So everything for the show, my warm up is the whole day basically. Is just getting in the right position where by the time it's showtime, I feel great. I feel positive. I'm excited. I feel like I know all the songs. I know all the changes that we made from the prior night, or, that's it. I was thinking about, you asked for wisdom or advice, and I would say this. I was just thinking as I was talking. This might sound pessimistic, but it's not meant to be pessimistic. You can't please everybody.
Mm-hmm.
In life. You can't please everybody. So if you're an artist who's wearing your heart on your sleeve and you're offended by the fact that not everybody in the world, 100% of the people in the world love what you do, you're never going to get that. So what you have to do is you have to just kind of look more inside and like what you're doing, like the improvement you're seeing. Say, like, I'm making incremental improvements at what I'm doing, and I am working towards something. I don't care if I don't sound like that guy, or I don't care if I don't look like that guy, or I don't have her gig or his gig. I'm working on my own thing, and you just track your incremental progress. That's much better than trying to please a world of critics who some adore you, some hate you, and that's always going to be the way it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that for mental health, with our social media age and comments and likes and Twitter, and I think we need to all kind of revisit that idea that, why are you doing this, and look inside and ask yourself, am I happy with my own progress? And if I'm not, do things about it. If I am happy, then keep up the good work. Don't reach for external adulation. Get it from inside.
Yeah. That is fantastic advice, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and with us. And I wonder if I say, Brendan, trying to figure out how close we live to each other.
I think I heard something.
So nice to meet you. Maybe we'll meet at the dog park someday.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. Thanks for asking me to do this. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
On the flip. Bye. And everyone check out Pedestrian for that.
Thank you.
New beat. Okay. Bye.